Great start. Good evening all and welcome to the Environment and Enforcement Scrutiny Committee. This is a meeting of the Council held in public. It is not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest to the large screen at the front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it is safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We also are recording the meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the Council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Thank you, members. So moving on to item number 1, any apologies of absence? No, brilliant. Item number 2, declarations of interest. I will put Essex County Council on block. Item number 3, minutes of the last meeting. If we're all in agreement that they're all correct, we can take a vote on that. So if we all agree, raise your hand. Perfect. Item number 4, we will move on to Councillor Webb to give us an update on the e-scooter working group. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Following the decision of the committee in November 2025, I was pleased to be able to convene and chair a member of a working group which looked into the use, regulation and opportunities and impacts of e-scooters within the borough. The working group convened on the 3rd of March and aimed to develop recommendations to present back to the Environment and Enforcement Scrutiny Committee and in turn to help develop an evidence-based approach to policy, safety and enforcement. I'd like to thank Councillor Pat Reid and Councillor Eddie Murphy for their support and attendance, and to Councillor Trevor Hammond, who volunteered but was unable to attend the working group. I'd also like to thank the officers facilitating the session and providing the supporting information needed to support members of the working group. The working group assessed current legislation guidance from the Department for Transport and e-scooter trial schemes in other local authority areas, as well as reviewing what works have already taken place within Basildon. Members were keen to raise awareness of e-scooters, which we recognise could be an effective mode of transport if there is adequate infrastructure in place. But this is obviously not currently present. In addition, the use of e-scooters is illegal except on private land and then with landowners' permission. Members were pleased to hear that 40 fixed penalty notices have been issued since August 2025 for breaches of the PSPO, of which 27 were for e-scooter usage in Basildon Town Centre, and that 64 e-scooters had been seized to date. Members also noted that the enforcement was felt to have been successful and commended council officers and Essex Police for their efforts to date. Before I go on to the recommendations, I'll just give some background information on the discussions that took place. Regarding the local e-scooter trials, the most recent e-scooter trial for Basildon ended in August 2025, with national trial schemes continuing to 2028. There is uncertainty on whether the Essex scheme will be reintroduced, and this will be dependent on pilot findings, and members also noted there appears to be a lack of clarity as to what the national intentions are beyond the 2028 trial. Private e-scooters remain illegal for use outside of private land, which in turn would require landowners' permission, as already stated. And working group members reported observing e-scooter units within their own wards on pavements, roads and cycle lanes. There was discussion around the Public Spaces Protection Order, the PSPO. The current borough-wide PSPO was introduced in 2022 for an initial 3-year period, which was then extended for another 3 years to March 2028. 3 years is the maximum duration for a PSPO under current legislation. There are several prohibitions affecting different public spaces, including alcohol consumption, pony and traps, car cruising, amplifiers, and illegal use of motor vehicles. It's important to note here that motor vehicles is a term used to cover all motorised vehicles. This includes e-scooters, quad bikes, and modified e-bikes. A PSPO can be varied at any time, but amendments must be evidence-led and proportionate and demonstrate that activities have had or are likely to have a detrimental impact on the quality of life of those in the locality, and the effect is persistent or continuing in nature. Any variations must be appropriately promoted and can be challenged in the High Court for 6 weeks from the date they take effect. Members also noted the current statutory upper limit for breach of a PSPO is a fine of £100, which all agreed did not constitute a sufficient deterrent. There is, however, legislation currently expected through the Crime and Policing Bill, which will increase this to £500, which could be a more effective deterrent. Members expressed support for the proposal to increase PSPO fines to £500 to act as a stronger deterrent, and requested that the Cabinet member may consider drafting a letter in support of the increased upper limit. Around infrastructure and public safety, it was noted that narrow pavements, potholes and poor lighting also impact road safety concerns, which reflects that town centres are not built to incorporate the use of e-scooters and are predominantly pedestrian focused. Members raised here the importance of raising awareness to parents over the illegal use of e-scooters amongst young people. In general, and in consideration that e-scooters can still be used on private land, members felt that the appropriate level of training should be required to use an e-scooter similar to a licence. Members also suggested that employers in the borough could be informed of regulations on e-scooters to ensure their workers are in compliance, and have policies in place to manage those using that have the mind to use as a mode of transport to travel to work. Members also felt it was important that educational communications should be circulated to raise awareness of the fire safety risks from the batteries when storing, as well as focusing on the legality and laws of owning and using e-scooters. Around enforcement and legislation, members discussed the potential to consider the use of drones to gather evidence and target enforcement and monitor high-risk areas, as this could be more cost-effective, but also noted that drone usage inherently carried more risk and would need to be considered in accordance with Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. Also, police capacity and general data protection regulation considerations need to be considered when gathering and sharing evidence. Overall, members felt there was a requirement for better reporting mechanisms, as current reporting mechanisms do not include near-miss incidents, which it is felt will provide a more realistic overview of e-scooter usage and associated issues, which in turn would support a required need for more robust evidence to justify PSPO amendments, as currently incidents are not regularly reported, which affects the evidence needs base. There was some discussion around location-specific concerns. In Pitsea, it was noted around Northlands Park in particular and nearby open spaces, including Elm Green. They noted that e-scooter usage taking place, but there are also visibility matters raised, which meant that e-scooters may not be readily visible to those on foot within the park. It was also mentioned about the Kingswood open space, and where there is frustration from residents who are persistently reporting incidents e-scooter usage, but there seems to be limited action taken. So this is something that needs to be investigated. Around Wickford and Langdon, it was noted there was an increased modified vehicles and unregistered e-bikes usage noted within the area. Langdon has a particular problem with where it has not got at the moment a town centre, although e-scooter is quite usage is quite wide and visible across the estates. So there needs to be a more robust evidence base to gather information if we're going to expand PSPOs within that area. In Billericay, low usage was reported, but it was as we had no representation there from Billericay, this needs to be left open for further data to assess this more closely. Whilst the group acknowledged the focus was e-scooters, the group discussed the observed increase in the use of powered e-bikes, which were equally dangerous in pedestrianised areas and parks. Albeit beyond the scope of the working group, it was felt that the more targeted enforcement is required to address this problem. So in summary, the working group would like to feed back the following recommendations to the chairman of this committee for consideration. Request the Cabinet Member for Law and Order Enforcement to write to the Secretary of State in support of a proposed increase in the level of PSPO fine to £500. That efforts should be undertaken to improve data sharing agreements between Basildon Council and Essex Police to support effective enforcement against e-scooters. That a communications campaign should be undertaken which aims to 1. Increase awareness of the illegality of e-scooters on public land or highway. 2. To increase awareness amongst local employers of the law around e-scooters. And thirdly, increase awareness amongst residents of the potential risk of e-scooter battery fires. Additionally, officers and consider the use of drones in undertaking works relating to e-scooter enforcement. And finally, near-miss and further information is requested from residents of the borough to support potential further areas of consideration for the Council's PSPO. In conclusion, I would like to thank the Chairman of the Environment Enforcement Scrutiny Committee for commissioning this working group, and again to participant members for their valued input. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say thank you so much to Councillor Webb and the working group for all the hard work that you put into it, and you went through it all with a fine tooth comb. And thank you so much for the officers also for participating in the working group. The working group was supposed to be a cross-party group. I was very disappointed to hear that two political parties didn't put any members up for this, despite there being several communications sent out to party leaders. They decided not to put a member forward where they could have been the voice for their residents. Also, with that said, I think some excellent recommendations have been put forward, and I would be more than happy to discuss this with the certain cabinet member. And again, thank you all for your hard work on this matter, so thank you. Can we open this up to a conversation, or should we?
It's your choice, Chairman. You commissioned the working group. The working group was only set up, it's an informal arrangement. It was set up to discuss the matters that were talked about at this committee in November. I guess it's if there's anything you feel that remains not discussed through that working group, but entirely your prerogative, Chairman.
In that case, I'm very happy with what the report and what you have done for the working group. So again, thank you very much. So we will move on to the next item of the evening. which is item number 5, which is the town centre security plan, where we will receive a verbal update. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm joined tonight by Patrick Cole, who is the Principal Regeneration and Economic Growth Officer. Following an item that was presented to the Council's Cabinet in September last year, where a town centre security audit and plan was put forward, Patrick's come along tonight to provide members with an update on progress towards that, and hopefully you'll find his presentation interesting. It covers a lot of ground. So Patrick, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. So regeneration officers have worked proactively with Orwell and Ernest Park since the start of the Market Square development. Adhering to the principles of broken window theory, ensuring that the beautification and strong hoarding that was visually appealing was a priority for officers, and we worked proactively to secure 100 metres of hoarding at no cost, which gave the town centre a better focus on the area of the development, and again raising aspirations for residents and visitors to the town centre, and to make a better visual impact. As you can see from the graphics, everything adhered to council branding. We've also been focusing our attention on the former post office site. Currently, it's an area of town that has poor visual representation in terms of footfall access. Natural surveillance is an issue, so officers are working to get this created to be the Basildon Construction Academy site. This will animate the site significantly. It will anchor footfall to this part of the town centre, and it will allow us to look at new options for creating new visual aids and hoarding that's more engaging with the site, that adheres to the rest of the regeneration programme. We're aiming for a spring 2026 start, so we're in active negotiations at the moment around this site. Towards the end of last year, we instigated a lighting strategy that was undertaken, and subsequently improved key routes into this around the town centre square up to View Cinema, and we've also worked with Orwell and Ernest Park over temporary lighting solutions along their hoarding as well, to help improve the wayfinding to the town centre and to make it a more secure and visually appealing place. There's been a significant CCTV improvements. UK shared prosperity funding has gone into funding significant CCTV upgrades, and there's also been dark fibre that's been laid into the town centre, which has enabled a significant improvement to the quality of the footage, which for reviewing and monitoring purposes. And again, there's been several CCTV cameras that have been installed in key footfall locations in the town centre to secure correct visual access. So including the upgrades to the actual monitoring site as well in the council offices. One of the other priorities from the Town Centre Action Plan is the activation of empty units. So currently there are repair works to the Robin Cinema unit, and we're in active discussions seeking an end user for that site. Again, currently there is little natural surveillance in that area, and is naturally not lit as strongly as other parts of the town centre, which benefit from more of a nighttime economy. So again, that will start to anchor footfall, and again it will change perceptions as well as access from the Great Oaks car park and other areas of the town benefit from extra footfall. This is also in line with other interventions that we're looking at, including the podcast studio, a youth club, and other meanwhile used items. There's been investment in wayfinding, so there's new totems that have been installed into the town centre, again especially from a visitor experience around signposting, and again it's all around creating that sense of place, trying to give people a sense of identity of the new town, and again we work collaboratively with the local architects for this. So the council are currently in recruiting 4 officer roles for the town centre security programme, which will help enforce with the PSPO and provide stronger coverage. The Make Space for Girls programme was launched towards the end of last year, which was a consultation with young girls from the borough, asking them for their views on how they'd like spaces to be animated and their thoughts on how the public realm should work, make it best for them. The findings of this work was used in the local plan consultation, and also gone into other documents and suggestions for the town centre master plan. Again, there's more ongoing work for this. There's a scheduled event for May 2026, and the idea is that there will be much more consultation in all sort of town centre place shaping initiatives. So to conclude, we're looking at future steps. The council is soon to be taking control of BTCM, or Basildon Town Centre Management, which is the non-for-profit organisation that operates the town centre and owns Basildon Market and its car parks. That will give the council much more leverage into being able to introduce more security initiatives by able to animate more events into the town centre, which again will increase footfall, more seasonal programmes for entertainment. Again, it will give us stronger alignment with CCTV at the moment, which is based, for example, Basildon Market has its own CCTV operations, and we will also be in receipt of Section 106 funding for public realm upgrades from the market pavement development in the near future, which again will give us more autonomy to do the next phases of development for the security plan. That concludes the verbal update. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that update. I will now open this for any questions at all. Councillor Mordecai.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I congratulate you for that presentation. Very informative. Thank you very much indeed. The one question I've got, we're going top heavy on CCTV. Now, from my past experience, CCTV is fine as a deterrent, but at the same time now, with the wearing of ski masks, facial coverings, that sort of stuff, it isn't as good as it thinks it is. Yeah, I know it's a deterrent. I accept it's a deterrent. But why don't we move towards, particularly with the Section 106 money you've talked about, facial recognition and that sort of stuff, which is now being used more and more.
Happy to pick up that question, Councillor. So we do obviously meet regularly with the police through the Safer Basildon Hub. I know through conversations that they do operate the use of facial recognition vans, but I understand there's been some challenges around the use up and down the country, so I don't think it's being used as widely. I think they've scaled back on it. They are still using it, but I think that there's been some challenges around the deployment of that. So we do periodically deploy that. CCTV is but one tool. We've also got a robust public space protection order in the town, and CCTV is not it's only useful after the fact, isn't it? So it's about working and as Patrick highlighted there, having officers on the ground. There is a security contract in place at the moment. We have our own community safety wardens, and we are recruiting. So it's one of a number of packages that help people feel safe in their town centre, as the vast majority of people do when they visit the town. So hopefully that helps, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Jeffreys.
Thanks, Chairman. thank you for the presentation. I just would have thought it would have been helpful just before the meeting if we could have had the presentation shared. So at least we could have had a bit of review. So hopefully, for the good nature of the chair, that can be shared with us so we can at least have it for reference. I think on some of the improvements, I was looking at them and sort of thought, where are the key metrics? So if we're saying we're implementing this plan, what I'm interested in is, so if we come back in 6 months and we've spent this money and got the Section 106 agreements, what should the crime stats be looking like? What should the reports be from the community safety wardens? And I think that's what we have to look at, is at the moment we're seeing the work being done, but we can't really judge any of it because we don't know what the change will be, because we don't know what it looked like before, because sometimes the crime stats aren't particularly well curated. So hopefully we can have some answers to that, please.
Thank you, Councillor. So you're quite right to flag this up. We do meet regularly with the portfolio holder and Essex Police to talk through the works that they're doing on the town centre, and they have provided us with an update that we'll go through later on in the meeting tonight. Now, obviously, the interventions that Patrick's gone through there are part of a suite of areas for improvement that were identified in September to be prioritised with the portfolio holder. The team are working their way through them in a priority order. Some of those are directly about, influencing and reducing crime and the fear of crime, but also some of those are about improving the aesthetic and showing the journey that the Basildon Town Centre is on. And I think in particular where Patrick's highlighted things like the hoarding, it gives people a bit of a talking point to say, actually, this is the building that's taking place, what's going here. It makes people part of that journey. So obviously some of the interventions are around crime and reductions in antisocial behaviour. I've got some numbers from Essex Police to share with members of the committee later on, but some of them are, there are other benefits to it outside of crime and security. So it's about how the town looks, feels, and more importantly, that reducing that fear of crime and making the town centre an attractive place for many people to come and spend their time and spend their days. And so hopefully that helps, Councillor.
Thanks, James. It was mostly just that if we're looking at it and we'll need the evidence in a couple of years' time for the PSPOs, we just want to make sure we've got everything squared away. So that's why I thought it's good that actually for a scrutiny committee we could have seen some of the stats. And I get about the fear of crime, but that's relatively subjective. You can't measure that per se, and it'll vary person to person. That's just a thing. So I think we just need to try and look at what stats we can look at. So when it sort of beds in a little bit more, we can see what the change is, because you can obviously look at things like dwell time, and then obviously we can see, well, has it worked, and where it hasn't, we can then look at it as a committee and say, no, that wasn't quite right, we need to look at it again.
Thank you very much. I have an idea. I don't know if it could work. Maybe we could set up a form of KPIs where now we could keep tabs in a sense of when certain crimes are happening. Is there a certain pattern? Then we could see if the crimes are going down for the future, which again would potentially help with the PSPOs as well moving forward. James.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think, Councillor, obviously this information is recorded. Anything within a PSPO has to be evidence-based. As such, I know that there are good figures that are recorded and form part of that evidence base. So hopefully when it comes time to review the PSPO in a couple of years' time, we can point to some of the interventions that Patrick's highlighted tonight and say, okay, well, this is the point where that started to influence that, or maybe some of these things had a contributory effect towards that. So I think that will have to come out in the fullness of time. We have to give it some time to bed in, as you correctly highlight.
Is there any other questions at all, members? Councillor Reid.
Just a very quick, simple question. We talked about spaces for girls. Is there, what sort of age group were we actually including in that?
I can talk in general, Councillor, because I've been working with them in relation to parks and open spaces as well. And I haven't got the exact ages because it'd be rude of me to ask, but they were. But what was really good is that they were. So the conversations that came back that I was involved in, particularly in relation to Gloucester Park, were about these were younger girls. I think they were sort of going into secondary school or sort of early secondary school age, who are going to be growing up in the borough and seeing the borough over the next 15, 20 years plus, and potentially having their lives, work and families within the borough as well. So it's good to kind of get their perspective on the ground now. And I found it really enlightening to see, this may come as a shock, but I've never been a teenage girl. This is a shock to the committee, I'm sure. But it's good to get that perspective in. So when we're thinking about designing spaces, we're designing equipment and play areas and things that have different perspectives and voices in. And that's the work that's really been valuable through the Make Space for Girls programme. So it's a really good and worthwhile cause.
Is there any other questions at all, members? No? Perfect. Thank you very much for bringing that report to us tonight. I will now move on to item number 6, which I find very interesting, which is the biodiversity update.
Thank you, Chairman. So what we've got in front of you tonight is an update on the progress of the Council's Biodiversity Action Plan. Now, the Biodiversity Action Plan was adopted for the Council back in 2022, I think, 2022, 2023, but it spans the period of 23 to 28. Obviously, we're coming up to 3 years into that programme now, and I think that there are a few people that I'd like to highlight as having done some brilliant work on this. And what you've got in front of you tonight is the key work that's taken place over the last 12 months. I will let Rob Baker do most of the talking on what's been taking place on the ground, but it'd be remiss of me if I didn't say a massive thank you to colleagues who are in the room tonight. But in particular, I want to highlight the work that Josh Childs has done across the borough in really making this a labour of love. Josh and the team, they bring in lots of additional funding towards biodiversity. It's something that we can really be proud of as a borough, and it's something that's continued since the plan was adopted across the borough. Now, as part of local nature recovery strategies and biodiversity net gain aims, you can look and you can see, and the number of good news stories that come back from our friends groups and our volunteers across our parks and open spaces really show the impact that the efforts this plan has had across the borough. I get a number of things, everything from orchid counts to butterfly counts to the numbers of different birds, and the variety of flora and fauna across Basildon is spectacular. We are very fortunate in the variety of open spaces and countryside spaces that we've got, and nature needs our stewardship. I think that what comes across clearly, hopefully from the report that you've got tonight, is the efforts of that stewardship, whether that's the efforts to bring back cows, grazing cows to Mill Meadows, and or goats to Wat Tyler Heights, or where we've done the orchid counts and the number of orchids are going up, and just seeing the work that's reflected across the borough, across the sites that our Parks and Countryside team have been working on over the years, and do day in, day out with some brilliant staff, some brilliant volunteers, some brilliant friends of groups, and the recognition is there in what we are hearing back from Natural England, where they are working closely with us and giving us some positive news over the sites that we're working on, but locally in terms of the things that we're committing to around the green guarantee and obtain, aiming to obtain green flag status of some of our open spaces. It all talks to a piece that Basildon has brilliant open spaces and parks. You're never far away from somewhere that is fantastic and accessible. And as we come out of a dark and rainy winter and into hopefully a lovely spring and a nice summer coming up, I'd encourage everybody in this room and anybody who's listening to visit your local park, see the work that's been taking place, and enjoy the brilliant open spaces that the Basildon Borough has to offer. So hopefully that's a little bit of an introduction for Rob. I'll pass over to Rob. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, James. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. James always does his very best to steal the whole show from me when he just introduces me. But yeah, as James says, the Biodiversity Action Plan is something that, from when Josh started, is that it was created. It was something that we wanted to do to mirror
the UK Biodiversity Action Plan, and it also connects to Essex's local nature recovery strategy. What is set out in there is looking at priority habitats and where we can identify those priority habitats and where the ones that will benefit more, and so we can target them. And here is, you know, I feel it's a brief outline in some of what we're doing when we do so much more. We're always trying different things, and a lot of that, what we do in our countrysides, and we're widening that to our parks as well. Parks are not just our countryside sites, but it's trialing different things and seeing what works. I'll pick out a few of the things from the report. So at Mill Meadows in 2021, we had an inspection by Natural England and looking at studying, and a lot of SSSI sites across the country have struggled in recent years, you know, whether that through climate or through lack of funding in these areas, and they worked with us to look at different ways that we could try and change things. Josh would be proud of me at this bit, because one of the species we targeted there is devil's bit scabious. I always found that I never knew that plant, but it's something Josh sort of got me bought into. But there was a decline in that, and so we changed the management. We went to a different grazier, so now we're using a local grazier and putting more cattle on there. That helps that management of that scrubland and that grassland. You know, and moving on from there, we're now in the next few weeks, once the cattle are back on there, we've got electric collars on them. That's not to give them a shock. That's to understand their movement throughout the site, telling us when their head's down, when they're grazing, so we can actually move the cattle around into the areas where we need to prioritise them. So even technology now is coming into the countryside, which is amazing. So there's sort of like great examples on a SSSI site there, but also Vangill Drive Nature Reserve. You know, it's a fantastic place. Sometimes it has its challenges with motorbikes, but we've changed our habitat management on that site as well, and having surveys done externally, which is showing good results just through the small change in just a short period of time. Where we want to go with next with that and Northlands Park, because we're doing quite a bit of work in Northlands Park at the moment, is getting the citizen surveys more so get our friends groups to start helping and with citizen surveys, so like the butterfly counts and understanding that would be a next step that we'd like to do to involve our friends groups. But there's a number of we could talk all day, and certainly if Josh was here he would, but yeah, I'm happy to take any questions on this. Just one other thing, you know, why bringing the service, as we know, looking to bring the service back in-house, that you know, we've talked about how that provides more flexibility. Our contractor will say that they can be more flexible, but I think it gives us a real flexibility within our service, and we're looking at how we can manage our main routes to create better corridors for biodiversity. So, you know, all along I feel that this is an area we're improving, and so yeah, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, and yeah, I absolutely loved the report. I'm very much a geek to biodiversity, green spaces, so I'll let the members ask questions, and then no doubt I'll have a question myself. So, Councillor Mordecai.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much like you. I actually enjoyed reading this report. I got a lot out of it. I was particularly interested about page 22, which talks about the environmental risk, the reputational risk, and the operational risk in relation to that. And then we move nicely on to page 31. And I'm genuine about this. I thought it was a really good, informative report. It talks about brownfields. But then I don't think there's any joined up thinking. I mean, we're all sitting down here thinking about the same thing, and I appreciate all the work that's been done into this. And yet tomorrow we'll have a planning application come before a planning committee that talks about building a house just on the outskirts of Potash Road, lovely wooded forest area, and all this will be ignored, which I'm really, really disappointed about. You do all this work, but we have no joined up thinking. And I really am grateful for what you've done there. I thought it was a really sterling good report. But we just get it ignored when the planning application comes in, like Potash Road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mordecai. So this was actually going to be one of the points I was going to raise. But I also believe that it's new developers need to abide by the Environment Act 2021. So they must deliver at least 10% more biodiversity than it originally was, and is that something that is being abided by here in this borough? So that's a
We're working with our planning team constantly. We're meeting them on a regular basis at looking how we can certainly get from biodiversity net gain, but also creating larger boundaries. Josh get mentioned all night. I hope he's not watching. But you know, Josh is a thorn in our planner's side from within, because he wouldn't want any development. When we say about brownfield sites, you know, brownfield sites are probably one of the greatest sites for biodiversity. You know, we've got what's known as Roscommon Way, the untidy industries down at Pitsea. It's not an accessible site for public, but it's one we manage for biodiversity, and there's so much, it is alive in there for biodiversity as a brownfield site. Just because you're going away from that monoculture of habitat into creating varying sites. So brownfield's good for biodiversity also. Thanks.
Is there any other questions, members? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to echo remarks already made. I was really interested to read this report. It's very well put together, and it's quite exciting stuff. I think what I was thinking, really, what cross authority work is done, particularly around rivers and streams, that sort of thing, marshland. Presumably that sort of takes place, data sharing and that sort of thing. I mean, how does that all get fitted together?
So Josh again leads the Wildlife Countryside Forum. So we bring in a number of external charities and groups to come into there. They meet on a quarterly basis to talk about learning other ways of working, different ways of adapting. It's attended by many of our own groups, but equally Essex Wildlife Trust, RSPB, Frog Life are one that we have got involved with in the previous year. So they've brought in funding, external funding as well to improve our ponds. So yeah, we certainly, and that's where the Essex Local Nature Recovery Plan links into this. So you know, this is we was part of that conversation with Essex when they built that. So that's about linking the corridors and making sure we're creating corridors. It's quite strange that we're talking to. I can't think. It's like Bee Life. There's a group that are interested in using railway connections. So in Wat Tyler's known for the shrill carder, and so we're looking to get that population of shrill carder moving. And it's interesting that we're looking at a railway line and connecting that through to Kentview Road and collecting that through to Swanmead and collecting that through, you know, so creating those connections. But it's about just this real education and while we're relaxing some of the areas in our parks. But there's a purpose to it as well. It's not just the council not cutting that bit of grass. There is a purpose to it. But it's interesting we're using a railway line to connect bees to our other parks. So yeah, we certainly but you know we've gone as far as Bournemouth, looking at wildflower management. So we're quite interested in listening to anyone with good ideas.
Put the goats out the cliffs. Put the goats out the cliffs like that done at Bournemouth. So we had Charvet goats at Wat Tyler Heights. Again, that's a closed area, but they are problematic goats. They did end up on the railway line at one point at Pitsea, but trying to manage goats was a challenge, and we've gone away from that and got the tractor back out up at Wat Tyler Heights. But yeah, it's really interesting. It's exciting times that you know, in making changes and adapting.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's really exciting stuff. There was just one other question really around the action plan 5152, page 5152, creation of new high quality ponds and habitats for low wildlife to increase biodiversity. It struck me that Victoria Park Pond has been dried up for quite some time there, but I think there was some work due to take place there, but it seems to have come to a halt. Can you explain any further background to that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So that was not last winter, the winter before. We did desilt that. That is, some ponds are troublesome, but just because of the rainfall that we're having. You know, it's one that we can go back and look at. Of our 60, I think it's 65 ponds across the borough, there was only about 2 with water at the end of last summer, just because of the drought conditions. It's trying to make them more sustainable, and Markham's Chase, as you'll know, is one that really struggled, and trying to make that more sustainable by connecting it to more of the land around it to give it that feed into the pond, so it can sustain times of drought, because we're going to see more of it, and then we're going to see more higher rainfall. So Victoria Park is one where we've got to keep monitoring, but there's some work undertaken over there not last winter, winter before. But I haven't been over there since, and I'll check with Josh, but there was certainly a lot of work done over there. It could have been last year that we didn't get the effect we wanted because it's such a dry year.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to repeat my question. I don't think, I maybe have missed it a little bit. In regards to delivering at least 10% more biodiversity than was on the site before, is that something Basildon Council is abiding by? Do we know, out of interest? So with the new builds that are coming on, with the new developments, are we as a council abiding by the environment? Is it the Environment Act 2021?
Yeah. Right, the biodiversity again. So we're demanding of that, and you know there will be sites that come on that are probably not going to meet that, and that's where we'll have sites identified for biodiversity net gain, so we get the credits from that. But yeah, I've not come through a site at the moment where it's not been 10%, where we're not reaching that 10%.
Councillor Jeffreys.
Thanks, Chairman. Just looking at some of the reports, particularly with the building that has been approved, how are we monitoring once the plan's been agreed at planning, and obviously they have a biodiversity plan, how are we actually monitoring to make sure as they start building that they're actually keeping to their obligations? That's sort of my first question on that one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So we work very closely with the Council's planning teams. The Council's planning team do have planning enforcement officers who part of their role is monitoring and making sure that planning conditions are adhered to from any development. So we work closely with them.
Thanks. And I was noted at the start of the report that I think we introduced this first back in December of 2023. So what I'm interested in is, since we introduced it back then, what has the measurable improvement been in the ponds or the biodiversity across the borough? Have we actually been monitoring that in any specific way so that we know when we introduced it and what we need to change on that? Because obviously we've got sort of just related to that point, we've got obviously SSI sites. So it's obviously making sure that, from when we introduced it, are the sites in a favourable condition or are they sort of subject to improvement? And obviously, how are we monitoring that going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So again, it's around, like I was saying, with the citizen surveying and Josh in place doing that surveying and looking at, where we're trying to improve and what's through our changes, what's re-establishing. In the butterfly counts, it's not automatic. And when we looked at Mill Meadows, it was, even Natural England was saying you're talking about at least a 4-year turnaround if you're lucky, because it was such a challenging site. But through our surveying, we're showing them signs. So there is surveying being undertaken. I'd like a lot more. I'd love to do a lot more because I know the difference we're making, but that formal recording is something that we haven't got in place as much as I would like. But that's where I'd like to say that, if we can encourage citizen surveying and getting more people like our friends groups, getting them trained, putting training in place, then that's something that we could get them undertaking and giving us giving us that data. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. And within the body of the report, this is specifically focused on the things that have taken place within 25, 26 to date. So what you'll see within there, the reason for a 23 to 28 policy and strategy there is that you've got these things take a few years, and within that you may have, we see with some of the counts that on a butterfly count you might get 2 good years and then a bad year because of conditions that aren't related to the condition of the ground and nature. It's just that's what nature does; it goes through cycles. So I think it is important to take a longer term view. So whilst what you see within the report tonight is some of the specific actions, it's the longer term piece that's the key thing here. That some of the things that Rob's spoken about tonight talk to.
Thanks for that. I just think looking at it, we obviously, just going back to the planning thing, we obviously just have to be mindful that when those plans are in place, that we're keeping a close eye, even if even if your colleagues in planning might not like the fact that you're asking them to go down there and enforce on possible breaches of planning. Just looking at it when you mentioned Natural England, obviously, to my understanding within the report, we have income coming in from them. So I was just wondering, when exactly was the last sort of compliance check to make sure we were ticking all the boxes, and what was the sort of result of that?
Thanks, councillors. We recently changed, so there was changes due to when we come out of Europe. So there was changes around the basic payment schemes. Where there was a number of there was a basic payment scheme and also a number of stewardships. So that whittled down up until a year ago. When that comes to an end, we went into a stewardship that we're in now. We've been in that for a year now, and we've taken full payment of that. So that assessment, that initial assessment, was undertaken to where we were. We now need to make sure we continue to maintain that. And we know, through our own management, through our own supervision of those sites, we are meeting those targets that are required by Natural England. So they can assess at any time. Josh is in constant communication with his counterpart in Natural England, not just for the monitoring of us, but also for advice and support. They're just not, they're not here to ensure that we're doing what we're doing as part of that scheme. But yeah, we also increased our income from changing that scheme by about £25,000 a year, just by changing them schemes. So that's been really positive. We do need to keep on top of that work. That's imperative because they will come and take that payment if we don't. But that's key to Josh's role, and he will keep chasing me if it's any of our other services that are not delivering for him. But yeah, that's I have no fears on that at this stage. Yeah.
Is there any other questions at all, members? No, perfect. So I've just got one more question. When the ground maintenance contract comes in-house, could there be certain times when the grounds maintenance teams can meet with schools, sort of have biodiversity mornings, a bit of an educational piece for the younger generation to see the green spaces and biodiversity within Basildon? Yeah, and I think it would be a great idea to involve the future generation in biodiversity mornings. So maybe a good idea to have on your radar.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So, again, Josh, this is the last time he won't get mentioned in the cemeteries report. Josh, he's attended schools. He's been into schools, and but it is upon invite. The question was asked by Councillor McGurran or Councillor Webb last night. That's something that we could do, and we've supported. I think it was Briscoe School. There was some wildflower planting that done. Josh went in and spoke to the schools, and also Felmore's School. So we can do that. We can support it, but it is upon request. It's not a programme we have at this stage.
Councillor Mordecai.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to be honest and I find the youngsters are far more biodiverse aware than perhaps some of we are, to be perfectly honest. They're really switched on about preserving the biodiversity and things like that, from my point of view anyway.
Is there any other questions, members? Councillor Webb.
Not a question, really. It's just an observation, really, on the back of what we were just talking about, the educational possibilities here, really. It struck me in the conversation that's been going previously about butterfly counts, for example. It seemed to me to be an ideal opportunity to involve the schools in something like that, to engender more and more interest.
Point taken. Yeah, we can look at that. Definitely. Thanks.
Councillor Reid.
Maybe on that point, we should be, instead of waiting for schools to invite us in, we should be asking if we can go in, so that Josh can speak to the young people, because as already been said, that young people are far more tuned into all this than we are, and so maybe we should, instead of waiting for that invite, we should be pushing that and saying, we would like to do this, and also, just as I agree with everybody, this is a very exciting report, and I mean, what's happening in Northlands Park, I'm extremely excited by. Being a councillor for Pidsey North West, what is happening, in Northlands is absolutely fantastic, and I think that across the borough we have got some fantastic parks for everybody, all the community, and I think we're very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I could take this offline. I mean, maybe with the project we're doing at the moment, it might be an opportunity to invite some of the local schools into what we're doing in Northlands Park. I'm quite happy we can. I'll get Josh to accommodate that. Thanks.
I can't believe I have not met Josh yet. Is there any other questions, members? Perfect. Thank you so much, officers, for bringing that report to us. It is very much appreciated. We will now move on to item number 7, where we will receive a written update from Essex Police.
Thank you, Chairman. An invite was extended to the Chief Inspector for Essex Police, who is unfortunately in another meeting at this time, and their deputy was on leave, so they have provided a written update for me, which, if you'd indulge me, I'll read out. So, Wickford antisocial behaviour. A lot of our attention of late has been around ASB issues in Wickford, which, although ongoing for some time, seem to have come to a head in January. with a number of incidents involving quad bikes in and around the High Street. Other key issues raised were the illegal use of catapults and youth nuisance surrounding McDonald's, and as part of a partnership response to these issues, the following activity has been undertaken. A bi-weekly partnership Wickford working group has been established. Trail cameras have been deployed in Cranfield Park. Drones deployed to develop intelligence and identify offenders flying over parks and traveller sites. Additional patrols funded by the Safer Streets Fund, which have resulted in drug and weapon offence arrests. Business crime team have worked with McDonald's to implement measures such as locking the toilets and turning off the Wi-Fi in the evenings and disabling the charging ports. Engagement events being held in the High Street and McDonald's. School talks about catapults and wildlife crime have been delivered in partnership with the South Essex Wildlife Hospital. All local officers were given a briefing and aid memoir around some of their lesser known powers around wildlife crime. Several arrests have been made relating to catapults and suspects' houses searched and mobile phones seized as evidence. 2 quad bikes have been seized that match the descriptions of those causing issues. One was seized after a drone spotted it. We've been provided with pre-authorised police helicopter flying hours with additional funding for ground support to complete proactive work around the issue of quad bikes at hotspot times. This work has seen a 43% reduction in ASB calls in Wickford in the last month compared to the previous month. A burglary series has taken place in Billericay following a recent increase in burglaries. We have a suspect identified who we are currently working to locate. A prolific Operation Millennium burglar from Basildon was also arrested in Kent on the 20th of February and subsequently charged and remanded with several offences. Work continues to link him with other offences. A recent series of young people being robbed of their mobile phones in and around Basildon town centre resulted in a suspect being identified and arrested. He has since been bailed and the enforcement action appears to have curbed the series. Proactive drugs enforcement. Neighbourhood policing team executed a drugs warrant in Burnt Mills on the 26th of February. They uncovered more than 2,000 cannabis plants with a street value of approximately £3 million and arrested, charged and remanded 2 suspects. They are now completing work to upstream and identify who is funding the operation. The Operation Raptor team have been completing a County Lines Intensification Week this week. Just yesterday, obviously at the point this was written, while completing targeted plainclothes patrols, they stopped a male in Craylands that was on bail for drug supply offences. He was in possession of 11 wraps of cocaine and was arrested. A search of his address uncovered 57 further wraps and a 4-figure sum of cash. He has now been charged and remanded as well. And finally, on domestic abuse. Domestic abuse continues to be a key challenge. It equates to 17% of all crime in Basildon and 35% of all violence with injury offences. While we have seen a slight increase in offences this year, 1.8%, we are also solving more domestic abuse crime and bringing more offenders to justice. We have solved 366 domestic abuse crimes this year compared to 325 the year before. 134 of those solved are for cases graded as high risk, despite high risk only making up 12% of all domestic abuse cases. This shows us that our teams are clearly focused on the higher risk areas where more serious harm is likely to occur. We are also increasingly successfully applying for domestic abuse protection orders, even if there is insufficient evidence to mount prosecutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for reading it out for us, James. Is there any questions from the members at all? Councillor Jeffreys.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the police through James for their report, and I quite appreciate just how difficult their job is in trying to tackle these issues. And obviously, in one of the instances with the quad bikes, a police officer was injured, so my sympathy remains with them. Hopefully they've made a speedy recovery. I think one of the things we have to look at as a borough council, particularly as we've got the business improvement district, is the McDonald's. I think the issue there is that the police are doing all they can and ensure that the toilets are locked and the Wi-Fi is turned off, but McDonald's has to be more responsive as a business to the concerns that people are having. Not that, you know, and that can stop people actually visiting our high street. So I think it's just being mindful that hopefully we can work with the police and McDonald's to try and have the company itself be more responsive to the concerns, because the police need to be out tackling crime, and if it's there, it's made easier for them, but it really should be that they can get across the whole town. Now, just on the antisocial behaviour stuff, I think what we have to look at probably as a council is how can we, if there's issues that we know happen in our parks, how we can make sure that we're responding to them effectively. Yeah, it might be, I saw in the newspaper there was a thing in Basildon with the dirt bikes tore up this park, and it's the same in parts of Wickford where we see that. And I think the council just has to be a bit more responsive. I emailed, it's actually outside of my ward, and I was dealing with it for a constituent. I'd emailed the council and said, there's an issue with the access, can you please just look at it? And it's actually because the council where this park is, the ground has shifted, so it's let the dirt bikes come in. They said, it's nothing to do with us, this access, please contact the police. And I think we have to be careful of palming it off to the police when this is the top of Elder Avenue Park, when there's damage being done to our park. We just need to look at it and say, can we just close that off? We probably have some contingency for these issues. So it's really, as I say, we need to work together on that. So I know I've gone off a tangent, but I think there's stuff we can do together to actually try and make Wickford and the borough a safer place. So hopefully some action points can be taken back on the McDonald's, but also in our parks as well, so that our parks are actually safe for people to use. Thanks, Jim.
I think that's a great idea. I think so. I work quite a bit up in London, and I've noticed in McDonald's there's a lot of bouncers or security actually in. Is there bouncers in Wickford one? No. So maybe that's something we could, or you could reach out to McDonald's in Wickford and try and get them to cross the line with one. I don't know how it works, but maybe a bit of an idea there. Because then I do see the ones that do have, because I've gone into Wickford McDonald's once. Yeah, it was for a fruit bag, and it was probably it was wild in there. But you go into other McDonald's, fruit bag. You go into other McDonald's that have security, and it's a lot calmer. So maybe that's something we could look into, to contact the McDonald's and see what they think on that one, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I have been in contact with McDonald's, but I think it helps if we're all pulling in the same direction, because it's a bit difficult with, if Councillor Westwick's in there with his fruit bag causing mischief, we've just got to be careful. We don't want him caught up so he can't chair these meetings. So, if we can, just reaching out, using our teams to apply pressure where we can, because obviously it affects our efforts to try and support our high street. So.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to take the comments of the committee back to the working group and the Safer Essex Hub, which is obviously a partnership between the council and the police. So I'm happy to feed that back and to feed back the kind words to the Chief Inspector. Thank you.
Is there any other question, members? No? Perfect. So we will now move on to item number 8, which is the cemeteries review updates, which I will now pass over to yourself.
Thank you, Chairman. So what's in front of you tonight is the update following, I was here in front of you in November and highlighted some of the issues that we were having with our cemeteries regulations, which were last updated in 2011, and didn't cover didn't cover a wide range of the practices that we were operating under. They weren't future-proof, they weren't meeting the needs of our community. We'd highlighted some areas where we wanted to potentially seek to develop those, and I found that the bringing that item to the last meeting was really helpful to start having that conversation. And we took the notes from our conversation last time, that fed back into the process that officers were going through to refresh that and review that. And I'd like to give particular thanks to both Glenn Owers, who's joined us tonight, and Stuart McDermott, who isn't here tonight, led very well by Rob Baker in terms of getting the cemeteries policy, the memorials policy, and the way in which we work and commemorate those we've lost as a community in a much better and more robust place. As part of that, we have been engaging with our community through faith groups, through undertakers, and that work continues to carry on. So I'd like to thank the support from our community and faith groups who've been very active in kicking the tyres on this and giving us some real honest feedback about their experiences, and also the families of the bereaved who we work with. It's something where, you know, it happens to all of us, but it's a time when you just want that process to work well. You just want the council to be there, you just want things to work smoothly, and you want to know that your wishes can be accommodated as best as possible. And doing that in a way that is sensitive, is appropriate to our community, but also is aligned to the working practices and making sure that we're keeping our cemetery staff safe, for example. Balancing those things is no easy task, and what I think we present in front of you tonight is a first pass at that, to say, actually, we've done the work, we've done our research, we've done some engagement. Do you have any other areas that you feel are massive omissions, as we continue our engagement with faith groups, and aim to bring this to a future cabinet meeting for adoption, subject to any comments that come back tonight, and subject to any further comments from our faith groups. And to go through some of the more technical elements of this, I'll pass over to Mr. Baker.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, as James has said, it's bringing the different policies, as in our parks and open spaces, memorial policies, roadside memorials. It's all around that one point of contact where people bereaved can come and access that they want. There's more and more people now are approaching us for memorials in our parks and open spaces. We understand that. They're places where people hold memories. But it's also a way of managing those. We do need to manage them. They're not all memorial parks, or, you know, we have a memorial park in Wickford, but it can't just be overwhelmed with that feature. So it is a way of helping us manage that. But again, importantly, it picks up around how the community is changing. And we've looked around Islamic burials and how that we can implement and make changes for different faiths as well. So it's real interesting. It's right outside of our comfort zone, in that, you know, it's not certainly not my area, but it's something we're learning on. It's really interesting. And also around making adaptations to when you're digging graves. It's around the safety of our operatives in accessing graves, and we've looked at different ways of approaching that through teleshore handling, which is a way of shoring up our graves is a lot more safer to work around, and it also enables us to do burials slightly differently without pushing those safety boundaries. We've worked with other authorities on that as well, to look at how they do things, and this is where we're getting to the point now where we're close to completing and be ready to release or put the policy through. So we'd really welcome any comments of any direction that you feel we might not have picked up in this. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say it's a very detailed report. Thank you so much for obviously putting it together. It's been another really interesting read on that there. I personally don't have any questions, but this is open up for questions across members. So members, do we have any questions? Councillor Jeffries.
Thanks, Chair. Just how are we for resourcing in the sort of team that deals with the cemeteries, and making sure that we're properly staffed for dealing with very sensitive inquiries is my first question.
We're well resourced in our burials team. We've certainly got some good, well skilled, and been with us a good number of years. A number of our burial staff. So yeah, no, we've got staff at each of our cemeteries. We also bring in additional resource throughout the summer to help us with that grass cutting and keeping on top of the cemeteries. We've got a guy that's been with us a couple of years, so, you know, we're thinking of the future as well, just so as people become older and retire on for that, or maybe move in the countryside, you never know. But no, it's resource fine in the cemeteries.
No, thanks. It was just some time ago I had some casework and there was a delays in constituents getting responses for dealing with memorials or in the cemetery. So I was just making sure that's resolved, because obviously those delays can be, you know, a lot's going on in those residents' minds. So we just wanted to make sure that that's resourced. On one of the points I saw, just checking it now, Regulation 7DVI, it says that it allows the council to lay flat unsafe memorials. I was just wondering, what's the notification process before that happens? And obviously, is there any process in which residents can make that safe?
Thanks, Councillor. So that will come down as part of our topple testing. So a topple testing is done every 5 years. That will be put into a programme. If that gravestone fails that topple testing, we will then lower the stone and then inform the owners of that grave.
Any other questions at all, members? No? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for bringing that report to us tonight. It is much appreciated. We will now move on to item number 9, which we will receive a presentation on abandoned and untaxed vehicles.
Thank you, Chairman. So the presentation which follows is an overview of the Council's approach to abandoned and untaxed vehicles across the borough. It gives a brief overview of what our powers are, what we do, and the demand levels on the team. So abandoned and untaxed vehicles is a function of the Street Scene and Environmental Enforcement team, which operate out of Barleylands Depot. They are a small team. They comprise of 1 supervisor and 3 street scene enforcement officers who undertake a number of different roles, including the enforcement of fly tipping, duty of care inspections, and also abandoned and untaxed vehicles. So an abandoned vehicle is a vehicle left in a public place without tax, MOT, or a contactable owner in an unsafe condition. Often reported to us due to concerns around safety, nuisance or environmental impact. And as we go through some of the numbers later on, you'll see that some of the times, a lot of the time the vehicles are reported through to us, they don't meet the criteria of being abandoned, which means that we may inspect or monitor, but often we don't always have the authority to remove said vehicles. So the reasons for removing vehicles is they can be arson risks, they can be vandalism risks, they can be damage, they can leak fluids onto the highway, that can contaminate land, and there is a requirement on councils under the Refuse Disposal Amenity Act and the Road Traffic Regulations Act and the Removal and Disposal of Vehicle Regs 2002. Untaxed vehicles, slightly different. An untaxed vehicle is a vehicle that's not paid the requisite level of road tax or is declared SORN but is then present on the highway. So SORN is a statutory off-road notification. If your vehicle is going to be off the road for a while because it's not required to be driven anywhere, you have to keep it on private property, you have to keep it off of the highway. As soon as a vehicle has a SORN and is on the highway, that's not permitted to be there and can be subject to immediate removal. Road tax must have been expired for 2 months and a day before the council is able to remove it. But I think it's worth highlighting that Basildon Council isn't the primary agent for removing untaxed vehicles. That's the DVLA. The council operates, when it does operate, with DVLA powers, and we work in partnership with partners who are also DVLA agents. They have to be accredited. But the DVLA do also work within the borough, so you will see DVLA tax check vehicles, particularly on the A127. You sometimes see them driving in by the Basildon sign, but they are about, they do operate as well as in addition to the council. So we currently have a contract with a council recognised contractor, a company called Redcorn Limited. They've got a few sites, predominantly they've got one in North London and one, I think North London's the main one now, but they've got a couple of other sub-sites that they use. But as again mentioned, the DVLA do operate. So the charges there are set by the DVLA, which you can see there's a £200 release fee, a daily storage of up to £26 per day. If you are releasing your vehicle for being untaxed, you have to pay a £160 surety deposit, which is refundable should you then go on and pay for your tax. If you leave the vehicle beyond the amount of days that it can be stored, there is a disposal fee of up to £96 there. And there are additional penalties which can be levied at court of £30 plus 1.5 times the outstanding tax, or a fine of up to £1,000 or 5 times the tax amount. So in terms of usage numbers over the last year, you can see relatively consistent. I've only got numbers up till the end of October on here. You can see the number of reports that come through to us. These are reports, not incidents. And on the next slide, I'll explain the difference between the two. Real spike in untaxed vehicles in October. Again, I'm not sure about the numbers there, but that's what the team reported through to me. They do look high, but it might be possible to have a 1 month that's an aberration there. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of vehicles that are reported through to us as abandoned aren't actionable. So typically over 80% of what we go and visit can't be removed. We get a lot of vehicles that are deemed to be unsightly or unsafe. When we get there, they are secure, they are in a safe condition, they are locked, and we aren't able to remove them as abandoned. And explaining this to residents can sometimes be challenging, particularly around obviously if a vehicle feels, if it's something that's not recognised and not familiar to that neighbourhood, but the powers are very limited in terms of what we can remove vehicles for. They are people's property, and sometimes because a car is unsightly doesn't mean it's abandoned. If it's allowed to be there, if it's got an MOT, tax, insurance, and it's in a secure condition, we wouldn't be removing it, regardless of whether it feels unsightly. So I did say that would be a brief overview. That is a very brief overview, and I'd like to welcome any questions from councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. James, why 2 months and a day?
It's in the DVLA Code of Practice. That's what they ask us to work to. Yep. Yep.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Reid.
Do you have to put a notice on the car before you are removing it or not? If it's...
So it depends on the condition. Usually we have to affix a notice notifying. Obviously, if the condition is an immediate concern, that will be a removal within 24 hours. That's the shortest period we can go to. So it will say, we'll put a notice on there and say we will remove this within 24 hours if it's unsafe. So that's the shortest period we can go to. So what we'll do is we'll put a notice on there, but it might take a while for our contractors to get there, but that will be within 24 hours.
Just say, for instance, there was a boat parked in a car park within the borough and it hasn't moved for 2 years. What would be the position of that?
Thank you, Councillor. So I've dealt with a couple of these in my time. It depends on the location, the landowner of the land, and also whether the boat is directly on the land, or because a boat obviously isn't a vehicle. If the ones that I've dealt with in the past have been where the boat has been on like a trailer or something, and if the trailer is then deemed to be abandoned or untaxed and in an unsafe condition, we've been able to take action against it. But it would depend on where it's located and what condition it's in, and whether it's on a trailer or not. So I think that the short answer is, if you've got a specific case for me to look at, send me the details and I'll have a look at it.
Any other question, members? Councillor Jeffreys.
Thanks, Chair. Just, I was looking on the slide and there was a big jump towards the end of the graph here, and I just wanted to have some explanation on what the reason for that was.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So they are reports. There was just a spike in reports in October. There were just more reports that came through to us. There's no more science to it than that, I'm afraid.
Thanks. I was just wondering that it just seemed that it just shut up in such a straight line. I thought something must have gone on. Someone's computer's not worked, reported it 20 times. Or just on some of it, do we obviously have lots of years of data on this stuff? I'm just wondering from a perspective of trying to see who actually dumps this stuff, because obviously this is a cost on the taxpayer. Do we actually have any sort of enforcement capability to actually check on any hotspot if we can actually identify them? Because if it's the same area, then obviously it might be the same person, and obviously just then we can catch them and obviously not have to foot the bill as the council or the local authority or the taxpayer. So
I think, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor. So what's interesting around the way that the recovery industry has changed in the last few years is that the costs of providing that service as an agent of the DVLA have gone up. You know, wages have gone up, fuel's gone up, vehicle costs have gone up, but the rate that the DVLA pays the contractors has stayed the same. So the removal of untaxed vehicles has been something that the industry has been pushing for the DVLA to revise their rates on, so that if you are driving an untaxed vehicle, it does then pay for you to be able to go and remove those vehicles. So we've had to work really hard with our contractors to make sure that they are present in the borough, because the volume of untaxed vehicles within Basildon isn't as high as, you know, if you're a contractor and you're operating in an area where you've got a lot more cars, you've got a lot more rich pickings, you're going to make those fees back in a more, you know, faster than you would by coming to Basildon. So we've worked really hard with our contractors to make sure that there is that presence within the borough, but we do get a small income for vehicles, for abandoned and untaxed vehicles. So it is a contract that is run at, you know, nil cost to us, save for the officer time to investigate. But we have to investigate. It's a statutory duty. So, but we do receive a small revenue from the removal of those vehicles. The big thing that the DVLA could consider would be to increase the amount that they're paying for agents to remove the vehicles on their behalf, which I think would help speed up the process across the board. But I think that would be the one thing that, you know, I'd suggest if the DVLA were in the room with us. But there we go. Thank you.
Is there any other questions, members? No? Okay, thank you very much for bringing that report to us tonight. We will now move on to item number 10, which is opportunities for future recycling, and we will receive a presentation on that.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is an update on the change to the legislation around simpler recycling, how the council's sought to meet that, and what parts are coming up next, and where the council needs to go. Obviously, with a backdrop of LGR to consider, and some of the timelines within this, and the full amount of simpler recycling compliance will need to fall within the new authority in a couple of years' time. So as a bit of background, simpler recycling is the largest change to the way in which households and local authorities are expected to collect waste in a number of years, since the Environmental Protection Act in 1990. The legislation requires that collections are more consistent across the country, more streamlined, and that it's clearer to communicate and therefore clearer to put on packaging and more understandable for householders to take part and do the right thing. It also makes clear that it's not just householders who are affected, it is businesses including non-domestic premises, which include schools, hospitals, caravan parks, and holiday accommodation and things like that. So the default requirement for most households and workplaces, and I'll get onto the exceptions in a bit, are that there are 4 collections from every household on a universal basis up and down the country. They are residual waste, which is your non-recyclable things, food waste mixed with garden waste if appropriate, but a separate food waste collection has to be in place by March this year, a paper and card collection, and other dry recyclable materials, which is plastic, metal and glass. Now, it can include glass, but there are additional costs to collecting alongside glass, and it does massively affect the quality of the equipment. And underpinning all of this legislation is something called the TEEP test, which is making sure that services are provided in a technical, environmentally friendly and economically appropriate manner, so and that they're practicable for the area you're serving. So what you'll see up and down the country now is all authorities number of authorities are struggling to get to the March date. Basildon has been ahead of that curve and put some of those changes in place a number of years in advance of the legislation coming in. So Basildon is fully compliant with simpler recycling as required at the moment. There's one further change which we will have to make at some point by March 2027, which I'll get onto in a minute. But within that, that's the minimum. Those are the every household in the UK has to have those collections, and there is not a stipulation as to the types of containers. You can use whichever ones are appropriate, given the test which I just ran through. So we're not expecting that to expand. We're not expecting that to change. There's been a large change in the funding model for waste collection and disposal authorities, known as Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. What that basically means is that there is a levy on the packaging providers so that they are expected to contribute towards the system collection, processing and disposal costs. So by running an efficient system, you maximise your chance of generating the revenue to then fund more of that system and reduce the cost to the taxpayer, but moving the cost onto the waste producer in the first place. So if you're a soft drink manufacturer that puts 1 million plastic bottles onto the market every year, you'll be expected to contribute towards the recovery, recycling and processing of those 1 million plastic bottles every year. So last year and this year, financial year coming, are the first 2 years of Basildon receiving that funding. And I imagine that over time that will start to replace the traditional method, which was funding things through a recycling credit for every material that didn't go to landfill. So the landfill tax would pay for a recycling credit. Obviously, as landfill starts to stop being used as a disposal method, the need for recycling credits will change, and the Extended Producer Responsibility Scheme will, I imagine, start to take over more of the funding responsibilities. So Basildon, as we know, has a separate glass recycling service, and the reasons for that are that it keeps the glass material out of the paper and cardboard, which having that material out of the plastic and cans, having that material and co-collecting it means that your processing costs are higher, the quality of your materials is lower at the back end of it, and we do capture a high proportion of the glass bottles through the existing orange box scheme, which is collected every fortnight in Basildon. So in terms of timelines, by 31st of March last year, businesses and all relevant non-domestic premises need to have access to those core recycling streams, with the exception of garden waste. We had that in place within Basildon. We do have a commercial recycling service which was launched last year on a soft launch, because obviously we were undertaking service changes this time last year, so we'll be pushing that further this next year coming. The exemption to that is micro firms, so businesses that have fewer than 10 full-time equivalent employees. They have a temporary exemption up until 2027, at which point they need to be compliant with the revised legislation. By 31st of March this year, all local authorities will be required to collect those core recyclables, so you'll see probably up and down the country there's been quite a lot of news coverage about food waste collections particularly being rolled out, but they are a universal service that needs to be in place by this year. There are a couple of authorities that have exemptions because of contracts that overlap with those dates, and but you will see that there's been a real drive to drive that up over the last couple of years in preparation of that date. And the remaining deadline from that legislation is by 31st of March 2027. We have to include curbside plastic film collections from businesses and relevant non-domestic premises. So that's soft plastic film, things that you get around fruit and veg and so on. We have to provide that collection at curbside. We've already been working with our contractor to get that in place by that date. So what does that mean for Basildon? You can see the timeline of change there. We introduced a separate food waste collection in October 2022, so well ahead of the curve on that. That is a key material to move out of the residual waste and continues to perform well. Garden waste subscription service for the remaining garden waste was introduced in 2023. That is not included within Simpler Recycling and is a discretionary service for a local authority to introduce. November 2023, the residual waste collection moved from a sack collection into a wheeled bin, and the separate recycling through a reusable bag was introduced in November 23, and the textile collection relaunched at the same time. A revised policy was put into place at that point, and additional capacity for residents to apply for non-recyclable waste was introduced at the same time, so a lot of changes there. April 2025, residual waste collections were increased to weekly, and the dry recycling collection system was changed from reusable sacks to single-use bags, alongside the same collection materials, so keeping paper and card together, plastic and cans together as well, and that led to a review of the policy, which was adopted by the Council's Cabinet in May 2025. April 2025, the commercial waste recycling service was also launched, as I mentioned, and then in February this year, we changed the way that we collect textile recycling across the borough. We're working with a firm called Essex Textiles, and we've rebranded that as Textile Tuesday, which means that the Essex Textiles operate within the borough on a Tuesday to make it easier to communicate and participate in the scheme. We have updated the website, provided more information on accessible guidance and assisted collections and so on, as well as providing more information on local recycling centres. And we have 2 brilliant recycling officers who continue to do education, engagement, road shows, communications materials, and are currently pulling together the finishing touches on the work they're going to be doing in the 26-27 financial year. Now, though that's the legislative requirement, now there are other materials that could potentially be recycled at curbside, and I've highlighted a few of those to talk through tonight. Now, things which other authorities have put into place are curbside, are battery recycling, which is waste electrical and electronic equipment, soft plastics and films, and Basildon, as I said, is almost ready for this and talking to our contractor at the moment. Mattresses can be collected and recycled, but the cost of processing them, we ran a trial, and the cost of processing them far exceeded the value of the material that came back from it, so there was a net cost to providing that. Electrical reuse and repair, so this is about repairing and preparing for reuse of electrical equipment. We have run a limited trial at Barleylands and continue to do so. It's been pretty well received. We work with the Lighthouse Trust to repair and put some consumer electronics back into circulation. And the current strategy expired in 2020 to 2025, but that was about meeting the requirements of simpler recycling. And I'd suggest that we move on to some of the future service aims. Now, I've spoken about in-cab technology and the works that the Waste Service has done to improve that. There are further works underway to roll that service out into our commercial waste service and potentially looking at neighbourhood services as well. We're seeking to grow our commercial recycling base. I think a lot of businesses aren't aware that it is a legal requirement of them to segregate their waste as you would in a household now. So we're looking to grow that service over the course of the next year. But we will be running some campaigns across Essex, as we have done in the past, to boost participation, particularly in food waste recycling. That's a key material stream to drive out of residual waste to increase the weight. We'll be looking at localised communication and engagement activities through our recycling officers and looking at trialling with a new reuse partner who are called Anglo Recycling to boost reuse of items this year. And the final one there is a deposit return scheme, which is due to be in place by October 2027. Interestingly, that won't directly affect us because it's almost going back to the days when you had, returned your lemonade bottles to the milkman, for those of us old enough to remember those days, and you'd get a deposit back. It's bringing back a very similar scheme to that through reverse vending. So you would have a deposit that's levied against a plastic bottle over a certain size that you'd be expected to return that to a reverse vending machine and get a credit back. Now, the reason I highlight that is because indirectly it may mean that all of that material, all of those plastic bottles that are currently coming to us through curbside recycling could, in theory, go through reverse vending. I think there's a number of interesting case studies on this. It's something that's in action in Canada, in California, in a lot of the Scandinavian countries, and most of mainland Europe. So there are mature deposit return schemes, but the expectation is that there will be one in the UK by October 2027. So as and when we get more details on that, a body has been appointed to organise that for the UK, and as and when we get more details on what the rollout of that looks like ahead of October 27, I'm sure I'll be back here to talk in a bit more detail about it. Open it up to members for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, James. That was a really detailed report. Just out of interest on recycling, yeah, and it's just asking the question, are we continuing up on recycling? Is it staying about the same, or particularly where we're totally separating stuff out now?
I think, Councillor, I've got Christmas is a busy time of year. We've got a lot of information to crunch and a lot of information to get audited. I think the last presentation I did was I'm happy to circulate with members of the group, but I think it goes. I think the last update I did was October time, so I haven't got anything else that I'm able to share at this point. Tonnages seem to be staying pretty firm for dry recyclables, particularly. There are variations. Last year was very dry for gardens, so we saw garden waste was hit last year by being very dry. But in terms of performance numbers, I'm waiting for some real data to come back in for the post-Christmas period that's got to get audited before I'm in a position to circulate and talk through that.
And through you, just want to ask one more question. I've never heard of Textile Tuesday, so how do we get rid of our textiles? How does that actually work?
Thank you. Yep. So we are working with a company called Essex Textiles, and there is a. So what we found was rather than putting it out on your collection day, participation rates were very low, and the contractor was having to just drive around roads on an ad hoc basis. We're talking to them about what's worked in other areas and having that focus on a specific day and saying this is your textile day. So what I'll do is I'll make sure that that's shared amongst members after today about how we publicise that. And it's a recent change, so I think that there'll be more communications coming on that in the coming months. But yeah, thank you.
Is there any other questions, members? Councillor Reid.
With the curbside collections for other plastics, are we talking about the plastics that we can at the moment take to supermarkets?
Yes, Councillor, that's correct.
Is there any other questions at all, members? No, I just obviously want to thank you for putting that presentation together, and the future of recycling in the borough does look promising. There's good steps and procedures getting put in place, so thank you very much for that, James. We will now move on to item number 11, which is the work programme.
Thank you, Chair. I refer members to page 104 of the agenda. There's only one item to be carried over to the next municipal year. So at the moment, we have the tree management policy, which is likely to come forward in June. So the report is asking that the committee notes and endorses the items currently identified for the work programme and consider any further items that need to be added, and to note the Cabinet Forward Plan and consider any items that fall within its remit. Thank you, Chair.
So, members, in regards to the work programme, would anyone else like to add anything into that at all? Councillor Jeffrey?
Thanks, Chair. I think after the presentation on the Basildon Town Centre security plan, I think we probably need that to come back as a proper report, just so we can see all the data that's fed in that sort of you'd agree to. That's the main thing, I think. So, looking at that going forward, if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good idea, Councillor Jeffrey. So, thank you very much. Is there anything else at all, members? No? In that case.